last time I came into town, I tried to look for that glowing headstone like
No,
Uncle Tom's.
Yeah. We didn't find it, huh?
I totally forgot to have her show us.
Oh,
I
really?
know where it's at, I'll show you me. She said,
How are you?
Great, how are you?
Doing wonderful for Rochester.
Oh, yeah, I don't blame you.
Can I give them the big events? So some really big things that the board approved moving 2 of the one-room schoolhouses. So I think Wayne's making it sound like he's gone for about a month, but then he comes back. Well, he ends every conversation, and it's so neat with, "I will make it happen." In June, we actually go and we speak at the 2024 Country School Association of America Conference. It's at the University of Toledo, and it's a 4-day conference. So we speak for an hour on the second day. And then in October, we're actually going to be hosting the Iowa Country School Conference, and it's sponsored by Preservation Iowa. So there's our big, those are big, yeah. So,
Will they be here?
yeah,
Never.
yeah. And they want me to come up with a thank you list of anybody that's done anything for us. So every giver, every grantor, because that's who you want to get these flyers into their hands, because that would be the person that would be interested in seeing just how far we've come, so, yeah.
Thanks, Teresa. So today we'll talk about the Fairview Cemetery up in Dunkerton. You see there's some things to look at back there. Most, if not all, that's online too, and dunkertonhistory.com you can go to and do a search, keyword search, or anything you want, or search for a name. You can find out maybe where a relative is in the history and stuff that we've scanned and recorded. So that site's available at dunkertonhistory.com. One of the articles I wanted to show, so this is a very old binder. It's back there. We kept it in plastics, it's so old, but it's kept meeting minutes from the cemetery board dating back to like 1904. So it's pretty neat, it's handwritten. You'll see some names that you might remember, maybe your relatives from the past in there. And then this is just an example of a warranty deed. So if somebody purchased a plot way back then, McNellis bought this one. They were handwritten. This was in 1904. And so on. So that's worth looking at online if you want to see any history or what happened back then. More current, there's a binder that says Composite book, I think, that went to like 1999 and started keeping notes. And one of the things it listed is the lost a lot of records in the flood back then. So they had to kind of scramble and recreate some stuff. So I put together just a little presentation, not a lot of slides, but the cemetery, it's up there. That's the marker you'll see when you first drive in. One of the older headstones are memorable is Peter Kress. So our American Legion Post 636 is Peter Kress, American Legion. Calvin Smith wrote this article in 2022, but it happens every year. There's a memorial service, so they go to all the cemeteries. If you're not aware, it's kind of neat on Memorial Day. Usually there's a guest speaker and tells some history. And this is the American Legion post that were there that day. And you can see all the military branches that are represented on our flags up the cemetery. If you drive by at night, it's pretty cool because they're lit up. If you've ever seen that. I took a picture last night when I was driving home, but it was blurry. Driving by, I didn't want to slow down too much. So this is James Dunkerton. So obviously Dunkerton is our town name. A big plot up there. And this was, he passed, it looks like, in around 1900.
It's pretty cool. I never knew his wife's name. I don't think anybody's ever spoke of it.
This is a Magee marker, so sometimes the first families would have put a big marker up there, and then individual plots and headstones around them. So obviously Magee's been here, the Magees have been here a long time as well, many generations. Fred Barker, so this old monument, he passed away in like 1856, so he was one of the first people to be buried up there, and this is his marker. You can see they've changed over time in style.
What'd you say the first year opened?
The first one I found was like 1854, 56, something like that.
Dan, can you talk a little louder?
Yep. So this is just a Google Maps of the area of the cemetery. I'm sure it's hard to read, but west is that way, north is up. So the A section, there's not very many plots there, but that's the A section toward the north towards like Stephen's Services. And then in the middle, the old north section is right in the middle. And the old south section, of course, is south. Yeah, that's better. That's the original cemetery, the old north and the old south. And then later added was the A section and the B section, which is west of the middle section. And then last was the W section. And that was named W section because, if somebody maybe knows, but I don't, a Weber donated that ground. That still has some farmland. So that's why that section was called the W section. So just different facts and figures. So it's also known as the Dunkerton Fairview Leicester Cemetery, Leicester Township. The earliest burial I could find on record, and I don't see a headstone up there, was 1864. That was Sylvia Clubine, who was just a child. She passed. Again, there's a Memorial Day service at all our local cemeteries every year, including our Fairview, and it's really neat to see. Some other facts, so I know there may be others like this, but Calvin Smith's family, there's 5 generations of his family buried in that cemetery. And then we have a volunteer board of directors, so we try to take care of the cemetery as far as mowing and upkeep and things like that. And, people can purchase plots, obviously, etc. So a little trivia. Today, if you were to purchase a plot, what size, width, and length would that plot be? Any guesses? Probably not, that'd be tough to guess. So they're 5 feet wide by 13 feet deep. If you bought a plot today. Now, back in the old sections, when a family would purchase a plot, they would purchase more of a family size plot, so that'd be 22 feet wide by 11 feet deep. So they could fit whatever they could in their 22-foot wide chunk. Hello, welcome. Is it required to have a headstone if you get buried, if somebody's buried in a cemetery, do they have to have a headstone there first to mark it? And the answer is no. So some folks will wait years or never put a headstone up there, which makes it tricky to keep track of who's buried up there, of course. But you will find that some of them wait or don't have a headstone right away. So today, if you were to purchase a plot in the cemetery, we charge $500. All the money, that's really our only income source. The only money that's only used for mowing and upkeep. So we don't, obviously have a salary for our board or whatnot. In 1922, if you purchased a plot, and that would be a larger plot, it would cost you $20. It's gone up over the years. And if you buy one plot today, that will get you space to have a casket, one casket, or 2 urns. If it was a family, husband and wife, 2 urns can be buried in the same plot, or a casket and an urn. Those can fit in one plot. If you have 2 full burial caskets, then of course you would buy 2 plots.
Dan, do you want to back up one screen since we had?
Yeah, I mentioned
since he was mentioned.
Your family is, I believe, 5 generations in the cemetery. Yeah, so it's really neat. We talked about the Memorial Day service, Cal, that you are a part of with the Peter Kress, American Legion. So this was, Cal, you wrote this in 22. This was just mentioning the at the different cemeteries. There's a ceremony which is really neat to attend. And of course, all branches of the military are represented in our cemetery. And talk about at night, they're lit up, so it's really neat to see if you drive by and see the flags lit up.
You should mention that was possible by Corey Bass.
Corey Best did the light, yes, donated the labor and material for the lighting of that too. So a lot of volunteers in our community make these things happen for us. I just thought it was kind of interesting. So if you go, there's a website called Find a Grave. You can go there and search for your relatives. You can put in your last name or a name of anybody, first or last or just last. And there's a spot to put in the town that they're buried in, so you can put Dunkerton, and it'll list all the people with that search criteria. A lot of them have pictures. Somebody has taken a picture of their headstone. You can find, so this one was Simon B. Kinton, born in Pennsylvania, but is buried up here. He was 77 when he passed. He's, as far as I can tell, the oldest or the first born person to be buried in the cemetery. Is back in the early 1800s. He's not the oldest marker up there because he lived longer than some folks. But I thought it was interesting, the difference in language now versus then. You can't read this, of course, but I'll kind of read it. So it said, early resident dropped dead. So they were pretty blunt back then. He, this was in 1912. So it says, S.B. Kinton, an old resident of this vicinity, dropped dead Saturday afternoon at 4 p.m. while sitting on his porch at his home in Barclay Township, 4 miles southwest of Dunkerton. He had been apparently in his usual health, though he was not very strong back then. He was 77. And he had just returned from driving a cow into the yard. He was well known and highly respected. His death is a great shock to the community. And then it talks about his birth and death. They thought that was more to the point maybe back then.
Is that like in the Courier?
Yeah, I think a Courier or whatever paper article. So another older monument up there, Sylvia Clubine. She only lived age 6 or 7. She passed away in 1857. So I don't believe she has a marker up there, at least not that I've found. But she's interned up here. Again, this is just Google Maps looking at our cemetery. So when you drive in, this is obviously Canfield, drive in. A lot is newer. There's a few plots, but there's a lot of space there. B and W. Cal, do you remember which Weber donated the W section? Do you have any idea? I know that was named because of a Weber that donated the land, but
I couldn't tell you.
yeah, I couldn't think of it either. I know I've seen it somewhere.
Could have been Claude,
That could be, yeah, I'm just not sure.
across the road there.
Yeah, I know. I think that's actually right. Cause it was adjacent land. There's over. I don't know the exact count, but there's over 1,000, 1,300 some plot spaces up there. So it's bigger than you think when you drive by. You know, it goes back a ways.
13,000?
1,300.
Hundreds?
So, yeah.
How many are full?
There's probably, A section's almost completely empty. You can see, this isn't up to date, this is a few years old, but there's a lot of spaces left in B and some in W, and a few scattered in the old, can't see my finger, in the old north section through here, and the old south. So I don't have a count of exactly how many, there's, maybe it's 75% full, maybe less if you count A.
We'll wait if you want to run up there.
Back next month and report.
Didn't they used to have like a 5-foot wide path down through the middle of
Yes.
one section?
Yep, great point. So both sections, the old north and the old south, originally had a 5-foot, not a road, but a path down the middle that you could kind of just delineate between sides. Over the years, that's gone away, where you'll see a plot right in the middle of it, or a marker right in the middle, and it's not as clean in that regard as it used to be. But If you stand here, you can still see it mostly wide open, spaced around the middle of each one.
So where are you saying is a W section? The furthest to the south?
Yeah, it'd be the southwest
Oh,
there.
because that's a Weber farm there, isn't it?
Yeah.
To the south?
Yep. And I'm not sure if you can see, but we have a little storage shed back here that kind of separates, well, there's a road, of course, but the north and south sections. I think that is it for what I had for material.
What year did that start at Dunkerton Cemetery?
I found a clipping back there that said 1925, so obviously it's been around longer than that, but I'm not sure when the name changed hands. I haven't been able to find an exact record. Yeah, and then we have the a log book of Board of Directors meeting notes that dates back to 1904, handwritten notes on through, and obviously it's interesting to read though, and you can find it online at the dunkertonhistory.com. We have it in the book in plastic back there, it's so fragile we didn't want to spend a lot of time opening and closing it. But you'll see some names from the past, maybe relatives that were board members back then. I think older Joe Bartholomew was a board member at one time.
Because from what my brother Larry found in researching, it originally started out as a church cemetery. An evangelical cemetery. And then when that closed down, somewhere along the line is when it was taken over by a board and changed into the Dunkerton.
Yep. And it might have been that 1925, I can't confirm that. Was there a church there too, Cal, by it?
Actually, the church sits down where Vince Sadler lived.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then it got sold and moved over. It's part of the Methodist church.
Oh, okay.
That was at one time an evangelical church that my ancestors started.
I think that was the addition to the south of our church that we tore down when we put the new building up.
That could have been,
Yeah.
I have no idea, but originally it was a evangelical cemetery, and then when they closed out, that's when it got turned over into the Dunkerton Fairview Cemetery, I guess. But that was originally donated by Daniel Smith,
Okay.
which is where the Weber farm is. That originally was part of their father's. He had a number of acres down there, and he gave each one of his 6 boys 100 and some acres, and that part was part of Dan Smith that he donated for cemetery.
Interesting. Yeah.
You go back far enough.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of what I had for presentation to share. Again, there's some good websites if you're interested, just to start researching whether it's your family history or just the history of the cemetery. If I go back to this Find a Grave front page, I'm not connected to the internet here, so. But anyway, you go there, you can again search date of birth, date of passing, town that they were buried in, first name, middle name, last name, if you have that much detail, and it can say, if there was a John Smith, you can find how many of them John Smith's been buried in any of the Dunkerton cemeteries. A lot of them have a picture of the headstone that you can reference. Now, what isn't in any of these sites is the exact location of where they might be buried. So if you go up there and think, well, it's small, I can find Magee, you'll realize it's actually not that easy to find a particular grave. But there are maps. Up on the far right of the board up there is a hand-drawn map that I think was last updated maybe in 1941. So that's got some history up there. We're in the process of putting that on computer software where it's more real time, but that's tedious because the records kept back then, and even 20, 30 years ago, it's handwritten, names can be spelled wrong. You search for Belmer and it's Belmer, when really there was 2 L's or vice versa, just things that happened over the years. So we'll get there at one point.
So you're talking about this map?
Yeah, I believe at the top, Julie, it says 1941 on it. Small print, might be over the edge there. But where we were on this side,
Yeah, it's curled.
yeah.
That helps.
Are there any descendants of that Simon Kinton?
I don't know, and that's, if you go to the Find a Grave, if everybody's ever went there, you can put in, you'll see his name, and then it'll say, depending on how much history his family over the years has uploaded to that website, it might say his parents, his siblings, his children, etc. So you can find a lot, and you can start clicking and you can kind of do your own family tree that way.
Sometimes they add in the obituary,
Yes.
or they'll type in information. The children only show once they've died.
Yes,
But,
good point.
so there could be other children, it's just, if they haven't died yet, they're not listed.
Now, does anybody happen to know the password, Wi-Fi password here? I can maybe.
Yeah. I don't know.
Or maybe it's, you guys might be able to help me more. There's,
New
St.
Barclay,
Francis,
Yep.
New and Old Barclay, Leicester,
Gresham.
Gresham.
We do, well, St. John's too.
Yeah, St.
Okay.
John's.
Francis has, or Catholic Church has one too.
Is that Pioneer one? It might be out, I mean, not.
What's the one north of town,
Leicester.
that one out where Kirkpatrick used to live?
Yeah, oh,
Did they close that down?
No,
no,
Is it-
we walked through it last year and it had been kind of taken care of.
Somebody told me that they didn't do any burials there.
Oh, I don't.
well, I think it's
know.
all, it's full, I think. But
That's
I
what
know
meant.
doing memorial services, we've got record of all the veterans in all the cemeteries that we go to. There's 6 of them we go to. And out there, I think there's like 12. But the oldest one out there that's buried fought in War 1812.
Really?
Yeah. So you're going back a long way.
Yes. And I did a little search on, again, you can put in year died, that date or before, and yeah, the older cemeteries, Old Barclay, Leicester, have older grave sites than this one. Definitely.
So why is there an old Barclay and a new Barclay? They're only like a mile or 2 apart.
Good question. I don't know. Cal might have an answer to this.
I have heard that there had been an epidemic and they were afraid of catching whatever it was, so they decided to bury the ones that were dying from the epidemic in one spot and the other ones in a different one.
Wow.
That's how that got started. They were afraid it was gonna contaminate people, so.
Hmm.
Put them out in different spots. Interesting. Yeah.
Well, they were afraid of whatever was killing people.
Yeah. Yeah, good thing they didn't try that for COVID.
There is
Cemeteries all
the-
over the place.
There is the Mount Zion Cemetery down by Dewar, which caused a huge controversy when the people that bought it started tearing it up, and they were
Yeah,
going
I
to
remember
plot.
that. They had to move all them, didn't they?
Yeah, well, I think some got moved, but the headstones got moved and piled up, and then they put a stop to it, but it's already kind of been desecrated, and
They have a
Yeah.
white fence around it.
yeah.
Is that on North Elkhorn Road?
Yeah.
It's on the corner of that and Donald, yep.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I remember when that was going on.
Yeah, and that's where,
They knew about it.
that's where the Dewar Community Hall originated from. It was a church right next to that cemetery. And then they moved the church into town. The church eventually died and they turned it into the community hall. But in the meantime, the cemetery got left behind and, you know.
It's a cemetery out by Joe Reese, or the Dust of Dawn. Gresham.
That's great.
It's Gresham.
Gresham.
Mhm.
What'd you say the one was over by Kirkpatrick's,
That's Leicester,
Leicester?
up north of town here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So this is maybe you're all aware of it, but if you're not, Find a Grave website, you can search for any first name, middle name, last name, year born, exact, or before or within 3 or 5 years. You can kind of do a lot of searches. If you put in Dunkerton, you can look in England, Dunkerton, or Blackhawk County.
Did you know there's only 2 Dunkertons in the world?
Yeah, they were.
I think we need to go to England.
I do too.
Have our next meeting there. Yeah. So if we put in, well, if we put in Smith, of course there'll be all kinds. Search. So this will say Fairview Leicester, that's our cemetery, and Allen Smith.
Here's Uncle Sylvia Arthur.
Yep.
Bessie, that was my aunt.
Okay.
Charles was my great-grandfather. Yeah.
One was in Leicester, and most of them are in Fairview. Looks like Smiths. Again, if you click on the link, you can see if there's a picture of their headstone or two. Sometimes there's obituaries, as was mentioned. Family members, parents, siblings, spouse, children. So you can really dive deep into history if you'd like on that website. And again, much of this is also captured on our dunkertonhistory.com website.
Find a grave, is that the name?
Find a grave, yeah, .com, just all one word.
Research.
Does anybody remember or know that our Fairview Cemetery was in a movie? Did you know that? Country, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, the funeral scene where they're at the gravesite after the farmer commits suicide was filmed up on the hill of, I think, section B. I think section B. So you'll have to watch the movie again and find that.
Did they receive any money from it?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
I'll
know.
have to go after the Hollywood.
every time they show it on TV, it's like, yeah, did you?
Okay, see where it says children?
Yeah.
Vivian,
Does anybody have a name you want to look up quick while we're here?
And this thing.
Okay, sure.
Obviously, you can do this on your own too if you want.
And she was Elsie Smith's daughter.
How up to date is this?
It's so like Ronnie Smith here, 2004 tells you the dates that they passed. It should be. It's not instantaneous, but it's pretty close. And I think it has. I believe an ancestor has to enter the information. So I think they populate it somehow. I don't know how they get it. But any pictures or whatnot, somebody needs to take that picture and you could submit it and they'll include it.
I know Doug and Larry do that with
Yeah.
our family history.
Yeah.
Like you could go on there and look up Louis Wilhelm Fredrich Smith. He was the first one in the area.
Is that right?
And he's buried up here.
Let's see if we can find him. And again, if I would spell the name wrong or whatnot, it might not.
You can also sign up to be a researcher at Find a Grave. And then people will contact you if they want to have a picture taken. You know, if they're far away and you're in the area, then you can go up and take a picture. It's pretty much run by the public. I mean, people submit things and keep it up to date.
Yeah,
So
that's the one.
Louis Wilhelm Fredrich Smith,
He and his wife were both there.
born in 1832 in Germany
Yep.
and died in 1924 at the age of 92. And you can see,
He had a part of, when they moved the Baptist church into town, he and his son contracted to put the basement for that when they set it down where it's
Really?
at. In the house across the road, they built that. So there's a lot of family, well, there was all them boys and they got their fingers in a lot of places around the area, so.
it says 50th anniversary Ludwig and Katharina Smith family.
and if you notice, that was submitted by Larry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
And Uncle Shorty, the one clear on the right, he was the youngest one, and he was actually my granddad's uncle, and about the same age. You know,
Really?
so they're quite a spread
Yeah,
there.
yeah. But yeah, once again, there's other pictures. Look at all his children.
Wow.
He was the one that donated
They pretty much populated Dunkerton.
Yeah, back then they did. In fact, there's one of the girls married into the Stout family, so they're kind of connected there. I was just talking to somebody else the other day, and I said, yeah, back then, usually families married other families within a few miles of where they grew up at, because they didn't travel that much.
There's one that was 1875.
Well, that's kind of our formal, what we have presentation. Again, there's things to look at. If you have any stories, maybe cemeteries, not the most exciting stories to tell, but if anybody has any or want to share or stay and have a donut and coffee, please feel free to.
Well, one thing I was gonna say, people don't realize that there's 130 plus veterans buried up here in the cemetery.
Great point. If you look, you'll see, especially they're usually in some way designated, right? So the current ones have the white telltale.
Those are the standard government.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a Confederate soldier buried up there. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and some of them will have, you'll see a little medal with an emblem of the different, maybe it's the branch they were in, or.
Legion might be there too, because the Legion, if I'm not mistaken, this is their 100th year of existence in
Okay.
Dunkerton.
Wow.
Do you know where the, kind of the location of the Confederate soldiers buried? That'd be kind of cool to see.
As you go up there where the flags are, it's in that section, it's about halfway back, and it's a white military marker.
Okay.
But it,
What's the name?
oh, I couldn't tell you the name, but it's marked as, he was part of an Arkansas unit, artillery, I think.
So how did he get up here?
Moved up here after the war,
Oh, okay.
you know, and why,
So he wasn't killed in the war, he was,
No,
but he served
no,
as a
no.
Confederate, okay.
there's a number of Civil War veterans buried up here, and there's a number of them, most of them out at Leicester are Civil War veterans. And, yeah, we've gotten into that now, and I think my brother Larry's found out that there's 9 of our family members that were on the Union side of the army in the Civil War, and like 4 of them were wounded, and so it was quite a. And the one family had their father and 4 sons all in the service at one time. You know, it's quite interesting. You start digging.
Absolutely. Yep, and even as recent, even though it's 80 years ago, World War II, you know, there's several World War II veterans buried. All the wars are represented.
Did we ever figure out what was it the RAF or one that looked like a swastika or something?
Yeah, again, there's these little metal markers that families maybe over the years have placed, and some of them we can research and figure out, oh, that was from some unique branch of a military. And some of them we had, well, there's one particular we couldn't find any history on. So.
Well, I know the Civil War ones kind of look like a Iron Cross.
That might be it.
And they have
I
the
thought it had a
Grand
RAF.
Army of the Republic is what
Yeah.
that stands for.
Okay.
Well, and the swastikas too, you know, before World War II in the Nazi Germany, you know, they were, I think it was more of a symbol of peace, you know, until they took it over. So it might be pre-World War II that you might see those up there.
Yeah, my mom has a quilt that has never been displayed because of that. I mean, that's what was on it. But yeah, I think it came across as okay.
When my grandma died in Missouri, we were going through her stuff, and do you remember this, you guys? Someone found a picture, and in this picture there was like a piano or something, but down in the corner looked like another picture in the picture, and it had a swastika on it, and my mom just about, you know, she's like,
Recognize any of these, Cal? It's going back a ways.
Yeah.
Any of them look like you?
Surprisingly, when you start digging into all the
Yeah.
family, and you know, not just the Smiths, but they're connected with Clarks and Follets and Bruns, and yeah, you start seeing them. Geez, I know where I got it from.
Joe, you should ask your question about the lighting up, the one cemetery
Oh, yeah.
thing that closed.
This isn't coming from me, so in our last visit up here, we were talking about having this this month for the presentation, and I don't know if it was Rhonda or somebody said, anybody have any ghost stories with the cemetery? And well, our mom's brother, my Uncle Tom, he swears that when you come into town from the south at night, there's like one gravestone that like glows. He said it like lights up and glows, and I said, is it from Stefan's, lighting, or is it, he was no, it was pre whatever. So he said it. I've never been able to see it myself, but
He showed
that's
it
from
to me.
Tom.
I know a few of them up there now.
It's kind
There's
of
many of the little silent solar things.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised how many light up out through there, going out through there in the dark.
Oh, sure. Yeah, he swears it's he doesn't know which one it is. He hasn't like stopped and like ran up there and pinpointed it, but he swears it glows.
We tried to get Bill Knebel to see if he could come, but he's not doing real well. He doesn't go anywhere much. He's in a wheelchair. Yeah, so the girls were gonna try to see, but
Is he in
he's at New Aldelia. Is that how you say that? New Aldelia.
So this is you can edit this out, I guess, if it's not proper for the society, but it's because it involves Bill and his old mill. I think he supported that company for years. And, so him and little Larry Weber, and I don't know who else, maybe Chris Stummy, they would mow the cemetery. And Bill had a rule. He was kind of the leader. He had a rule that you couldn't have a beer until you ran out of gas in your lawnmower. And so they push mow. They couldn't figure out for years how Bill kept drinking all this beer, and finally he told me, because I don't fill my tank up all the way. I just put a little bit of gas in there. So he said Larry was so mad, but they had a chuckle out of it. But yeah, Bill took care of that for years and years, I think.
I know my grandpa Tom was a grave digger for a while.
Interesting, yeah, it's if you go up there, now it's by machine, of course, a full grave, a backhoe that we hire. Urns we still dig by hand, but you'll hear stories of somebody that, many years ago just buried their loved one themselves. Maybe it was in a wood box, maybe it was in a plastic tote, whatever they could find. The history up there that probably never get told is probably the most interesting.
So they actually buried them in the cemetery themselves?
Yeah, there weren't necessarily rules back.
Still
100 years
people
ago.
want to do it today.
Yeah, they'll ask.
Do they?
Yeah, urns. They
Oh.
all dig their own.
How deep do urns have to be?
I go as far as I can stick my arm down that hole.
Of course, the worry is that frost would heave them up. If you look,
Thanks to Joe B. and Rick Fueling, we got an auger now, so we can go a little deeper.
yeah, Ronnie and I spent a lot of hours up there the last few years digging urn holes. Calvin's helped me out a few times and making sure I get plots in the right spot.
Yeah,
We will
there's
tell that story.
surprisingly how many graves up there are in the wrong spot.
Yeah, that's a fact. There are several graves that aren't where they're supposed to be from years and years ago. But
We had that.
We will probe them when there's nothing down there.
yeah.
Yeah, we had the same thing. We buried our dad up there, and I think it was Cliff McMillan called Mom and said, "I'm so sorry, but it's in the wrong spot." So it was like within a week or so they had to move him over a little bit. So.
Oh my gosh.
Have you ever buried the wrong person?
Not that
There-
we know of.
Okay.
They haven't said anything.
We haven't
Well-
been on the board long enough to find out.
I'm sure there's instances.
I came across a story that there was a Dunkerton, somebody that had a connection to Dunkerton and served in, I think it was the Civil War, and there was another man that was friends with him, and they lived in the same old folks home, and the one guy had left the home for some reason, and the other guy was out walking in Waterloo, ended up getting hit by a car, but they identified him as the other person because they were friends and they looked similar. And so anyway, they buried him, and the guy, they buried him in the friend's plot. Well, somehow it came out that that's the wrong guy. I think the family actually went to the funeral home.
Identified it by the coat.
Identified
wore.
it by the coat.
Yeah.
They still had the man's clothing at the funeral home, and the son came in and said, "That's my dad's coat." So then they figured out that it's the wrong guy, and they had to move him because he was taking up the other guy's plot.
Need that someday.
And the weird thing was, in the newspaper, the very same issue, they had that one guy was missing, and this other guy was dead.
And they had
Wrong one.
he was missing because he's dead.
Yeah.
So we don't know what, maybe the bigger cemeteries do as far as double checking plot spaces and if there's burials or not that are sold that you can't tell. But if somebody's gonna be buried and we think, okay, they're in this spot, but we wanna confirm it, we have a long thin metal rod that we have to push down in the ground so many feet, and then if it's a vault burial, full casket will hit the cement hard top and you can tell. But that's a lot of sometimes poking around and finding, well, there's actually nobody here, there's supposed to be, or vice versa.
Well, and I think the guy that was buried in the wrong place, he's at St. Francis Barclay Cemetery.
Is there a difference between plot and lot?
No, for us it's the same.
Oh,
Interchangeable, yeah.
Well, they used to sell big family plots.
Yeah, we talked about that right before we got, used to be a 22-foot wide family plot. You could fit in however many you wanted to. Now you buy individual ones in the new part that's 5 foot wide, 13 foot deep. Yeah. And it takes about 3 feet. The casket's about 3 feet, and you leave at least a foot on each side, of course, so you're not right on.
Have you ever had to disinter somebody for some reason?
We haven't. There's been a few times when we weren't 100% sure if anybody was buried there, and Cal and I were up there watching a burial. Maybe we won't mention the name, but the living relative said, "Well, I think I buried my infant son right here in a plastic tote, but I'm not sure." So
Really?
there's a chance we're going to see a deceased baby while he's digging. We sit there, fingers crossed. Luckily, it didn't happen. But, yeah, you just never know.
Dan, can you talk about Olivia and what she's?
Yeah, so one of the books back there, was it Roy Ortner? That he would go through and make a little write-up, whether he found an obituary or new, about every single person in the cemetery. He quit that about 2001, I think. Well, since then, Olivia Tisue, she just took it upon herself to kind of start updating that too. So she's working hard and has to update 2000 to present. It's every time there's another person buried, it's then it's outdated, but she's keeping it up. So she'll go up there, you might see her up there taking pictures, writing obituaries, ask family members, hey, I don't have anything on so and so, do you know anything? And it's pretty neat when she's still working on it. It's a tedious task, but it's really history of everyone buried in that cemetery she's working on. So that's also available. It will be on our DunkertonHistory.com, where you can search whether it's your grandfather or grandmother.
That's one thing with the Legion. We get people getting brought in from, wherever and buried up here, and unless we're involved with doing military rites, we have no idea if there's another veteran buried up there. So if you know anybody that's a veteran that's buried up there that doesn't get recognition, just contact us and let us know, because we don't want to miss anybody if we can help it.
Yeah.
We're not perfect either.
Yeah, it's only as good as the information you have, Rick.
Yeah.
There's quite a few stones up there you're not on. We don't really know who it is.
Yeah, or they're so old that it's hard to, almost impossible to read. Yeah. I think the farthest in the last 3 years that I've been on the board, maybe you guys remember different, there was somebody that passed away in Council Bluffs, but he was originally from the area. So yeah, it's not just necessarily Dunkerton residents current that were buried up there. They maybe have a history to the area.
Yeah, I memory serves me right, one of the Magees that was, lived down in Arizona when he died, he brought him up here, he was buried up here. Well, they do come from all over,
Yeah.
different corners of the country.
Yep. Any other stories or thoughts? Otherwise, feel free, obviously, to stay and chat or look at the clippings up there. The map hanging on the wall there just shows the old cemetery sections and the new sections when they were added. And on the right table is the old handwritten map.
How old is that?
I think it was 1941, I believe is the date, handwritten on it.
Oh, yeah.
Dan, sometime we need to take that into you and I to their big scanner so we can put it online.
Yep, that'd be great.
It's too big for ours, so we have a collection of things that are ready to go, so we'll let you know.
Yeah, sounds good.
Are there any plans to publish the information that Olivia's gathering into a book, kind of like Ortner's was?
I think she plans to do that when she's ready. She's getting really close. I'm not sure if we can help her with that if she needs it.
She had sent me a list of people she was having trouble finding, and we didn't find them all yet, but maybe we need to publish that somewhere. And
Yeah, people might say, hey, I know
Yeah.
something that's my great aunt or whatnot.
mhm.
Yeah, so I think she hopes to get it, it's really close to being done before she goes to that step versus at 80%, and you're still missing something.
And of course, it's never done either.
Yeah, it's only up to date by the print dates.
Yeah.
You were talking about random people possibly being buried here. Out at New Barclay a couple years ago, I noticed this grave, and it was a young person. And so I kind of was asking around and said, who is this? And nobody knew. And then I talked to somebody, and they said, well, what happens is if a family doesn't have much money, they might just call around and find the cheapest place to buy a lot.
Mhm.
And that's where they get buried, even though they have no connections to this area at all.
Mhm. That reminds me of another thing we came across about the Leicester Cemetery, how that got started. There was a family coming through by wagon train, and I think they lost 2 of their children, and they were camped near this farmer's land, and he let them bury the children there. So that's what started the Leicester Cemetery out north of town.
Where are the Barclay ones? Is that the Fairbank Jessup Road?
The Barclay ones, Liz?
Where are the new and old?
They're over on Barclay Road, which is 3 miles south, and then 3 miles east. So,
I don't remember seeing it.
actually, the one I was talking about, I misspoke, was Old Barclay. And then, because at one time there was gonna be a town there,
Mm-hmm.
and then when the railroad built in Jessup and Fairbank, Barclay just kind of disintegrated, or dissolved. But then New Barclay, they built it up the road it's actually on, I believe that's Newell, it's up the road a little over a mile.
Okay.
But they're still being used, there'll be burials out there once in a while.
All right. Thank you, everybody. It's great to see everyone. Appreciate the stories.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.